Hi everyone, this is Richard. In this video, let's talk about the program format and structure. So we have a simple program here, okay? So dog equals new dog, using dependency injection. So I have a class dog and I have a class cat, okay? And I am injecting legs, the class legs, into both of these because both dogs and cat have legs. And I'm gonna have a simple class legs, number of legs, the default is set to 4, okay? So I'll instantiate, I'll create a dog and I'll create a cat, and they both have legs. So I'll just say the dog legs, the number of dog legs. So dog.legs, remember, dog.legs, and legs dot number of legs. Okay? And so we'll print it. It says dog legs 4, cat legs 4. Now this is a very simple program, of course. Let me just make sure it's formatted correctly. This is a very simple program, and it's all in just a little bit scrolling going on, right? But imagine C# is really intended for programs that go thousands, millions of lines of code. If you can imagine that, you'd be scrolling, trying to find some things. So you have to organize it very well. And how you organize it is usually you put your classes, the classes that are in common, in one particular file or series of files so that you can go to it a little bit more easily. You don't have to keep scrolling. Yeah, you have to click on here, but at the same time, it's easier to maintain. At least that's what I'm told. I'll accept that, okay? So how do we do that? Well, in Visual Studio Code, we could create a new file, and we'll call it like animals.cs. You have to put .cs. If you don't do that, it doesn't work. And it took me a long, long time to figure that one out, okay? So let's do that. I'll copy this, delete it, put it in animals.cs. And the program should still work just as well. Run it again. And so you have class legs here. But wait a minute. It should run up right here soon. Okay, same thing. What if you want to do another class for legs? So I'm going to call it like body parts. So the animal body parts. In the future, I plan on adding more parts like a tail, eyes, and stuff like that. So I'll just put it like in body parts. Same thing, program should run just as well. Okay? But sometimes you want to organize them a little bit better, not just with the file name. Sometimes you have a number of files, but you want to organize it with something else in common. So for example, animals, you want to be able to reference, say, okay, this is talking about animals. And how you do that is you use what we call a namespace. So a namespace is basically a way of telling C# that this is a set of classes in here. Let's just call it animals. I could call it anything. You don't have to name it the same thing. You do not have to name it the same thing as the file name. Okay, it's separate from that. And I'll put it all inside of here, and we'll format it. So basically, C# says, in namespace animals, it's a series of contains a series of classes underneath it that have something in common. So I could write like mammals instead, and maybe there would be another super class, a super namespace called animals, and then mammals or something like that. You can always do that. So public class dog, public class cat. Okay? So, but if I'm going to do that up here, I have to use the keyword using animals. So what it's saying is that in this program, I'm going to use a separate namespace and import it from over here. The computer is smart enough to tell you where it's actually coming from, okay? If you use using and type system, there's a bunch of different other things that we can use, and we'll use them in the very near future. So system, if you have something like using system, you could put a dot and notice there's a bunch of other things under there, and it could keep going down the line. So there's a lot of libraries that you can use, that you can import into your program with C#. I guess that'll be a future video, right? Videos, right? But this is how you organize a namespace. Again, namespace being a bunch of classes that have something in common. Now, notice legs and dogs and cats don't have a lot in common, so they should probably be separate, and maybe even in a separate namespace. So maybe we'll just name that too. Name Let's just call it body parts. Maybe I'll change the name some other time, but you should pick a good name so you don't have to keep changing the name, because once you do that, you have to change a lot of dependencies in the future, whatever it depends upon. So if another program requires body parts, the namespace body parts, and you change the name to body part, then you have to change all the other programs that refer to it, right? The other pieces of code, actually, that refer to it. So we'll have to keep that in mind. So we'll say namespace body parts, and then here we'll say using animals, using body parts. Wait a minute, I'm seeing some errors here, though, right? So right inside of here, there's an error here. Well, look that animals is using body parts. It's a different namespace, right? So it's not the same namespace anymore. If you didn't write this, it would be the same namespace. It's what we call a global namespace. It's usable by your entire program. But sometimes you don't actually want to do that. And so here you would say body parts. And the errors go away. I mentioned that the purpose of namespace is to make it easier to organize, and that is true, but I think part of the reason seems to be that it's a way of organizing how much memory you're getting. So notice that if I didn't put the namespace, the public class is accessible to the entire program. But if I just put the namespace animals and then I go to body parts and I do not put using body parts right here, namespace body parts, this particular file does not have access to animals.cs, but animals.cs has access to namespace body parts because I put using. So if you think about it that way, it kind of makes sense that the memory access of each, and again, we're talking about thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of files here. If you cut off access to all your files, it would cut down on the memory usage and the computer usage of going from one file to the next, making sure that it has body parts. It has to use everything. So every time you do any program right here, you access a namespace, a global namespace. I hope that makes sense. So by narrowing the namespace down, that you don't use it unless you specifically ask to use it. Okay? This should work same way as before. One more thing, let's try making a new folder. Okay, so I'm going to say Animal Kingdom folder. So I'm going to put all my animals.cs in that folder because it's easier for me to remember it that way and it's easy to keep in track. And body parts, I think I'm just going to keep it where it is, okay? And so using body parts, it should work the same way all over again. Okay, so every once in a while, when you move it into a different folder, oh, by the way, you can create multiple folders here also. Animal Kingdom, let's say Mammal Kingdom. And you could put the animals under the Mammal Kingdom. Okay, and it should still work. So you can use nested folders. So inside of folders, it's in the Mammal Kingdom folder, not the. So you could use it in different folders, but the computer should still have access to it all, no matter what. Every once in a while, it won't work well on Visual Studio Code. If that's the case, what you do is you close it down. There's like errors everywhere. And can't recognize this, can't write this. You close it down and you open up again. It took me all night to figure that out. So if that's a problem in the future, close it, save it, close it down, run the same thing over, and it actually works. Okay? So that's the program format and structure. The format, the structure and being create classes and put the classes together as close as possible with other classes similar to it. Consider using a namespace for that so it cuts down, so it makes the organization easy and cuts down on the memory usage of it. And if you want to access that namespace, use the using keyword up in the very top. Okay? Thanks.